A special thank you to our panel for volunteering to share some of your industry insights. My name is Leticia Lujan. I graduated from USC in 2002. I majored in economics with a minor in psychology. I've been working in crisis management and turnaround consulting for 15 years, and I'm excited to hear from our panel this evening. Consulting is a broad term. It includes a lot of different fields, which is why my description of what type of consulting I do was so long, because oftentimes it's easier to just be specific. Common areas of practice for econ majors are finance consulting, economics consulting, management strategy, and litigation. And while these focus areas may be different, all consultants rely on a lot of the same skills. So before we dive into the details of what those skills are and what the day-to-day being a consulting, what that day-to-day looks like, I just want to offer our panel a chance to introduce themselves. And I'll go ahead and start with John. If you could just share a little bit about, when you graduated and also what your current role is in consulting, that would be great.
Hi, hi everyone. My name is John Babic. I graduated from USC in 2006 with a degree in economics and also political science. But for the most part, I've put my economics degree to use. I work in economic consulting, kind of related to litigation. My specialty is employment or labor and employment economics. So whenever there's a big lawsuit, I go in and we will analyze the data, whatever the issues are, depending on the state laws. We analyze the data, and then we either file a report or we testify in court our expert opinions on the issues. So the actual purpose is that our I guess our insight is there's weight given to it based on our experience in the field. And so I've been doing this for about 18 years.
So it's been a while. It's been a little while, but that's great. That's great info. Let's see, Apurvi.
Hi everyone, my name is Apurvi and I graduated in May 22 and I got a degree in economics with a minor in data analytics. I'm working in economic consulting specifically for the healthcare team, and I've been doing this for the last year and a half. That's me.
Thank you. Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm a senior analyst at Cornerstone Research. I graduated USC in 2021. I did my undergrad in econ and my master's in the applied economics track. I think John and Apurvi have pretty well covered what we do in econ consulting. Cornerstone is a generalist firm, so I've gotten the chance to work on cases from finance to antitrust, healthcare, but focused mostly on econ cases. I've really enjoyed it so far, and I'm happy to share more with you guys.
Great, thank you very much. I want to kind of jump into some specifics, but we'll start off, I guess, with a broader question on how did you get here? What was your path to consulting? Was it just happened to be interested all along and that's what your number one goal was? Or did you, just stumble upon it? Or, just if you could share a little bit with everyone, that would be great. Let's go. Apurvi, could you start?
Yeah, sure. So, since I studied economics, I think I was very confused throughout college what I wanted to do afterwards. I'm an international student, so I wasn't sure if I'm going to be in the US or go back home. And I didn't know what consulting means or anything. And I took a class on economic litigation consulting at USC. And because of the minor in data analytics that I took, I had a lot of programming skills, and I worked at Spec Lab where I got some research experience. So I would say that all these different experiences, I think, position me really well for econ consulting, and it seemed like it was a very good fit for me based on those experiences.
That's great. That's great. Natalie?
Sure. So when I started college, I wanted to be an investment banker. I was really into finance and thought that was kind of where I would go to. Kind of as I continued, throughout my time at USC, I realized I liked my econ classes a lot more than my finance classes. I looked into, management consulting, and kind of by accident stumbled upon economic consulting and thought it was a good fit. I did a summer analyst position here before my senior year, and returned after that. So kind of how I got here.
Great. Thank you. John, after 18 years, do you remember the path?
I do very clearly, actually. I actually have a similar story. So when I was in undergrad, I interned at an investment bank, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. But after a year of doing that, I realized that I wasn't just really interested in it. The work was all kind of the same for me, particularly. I think it's different in every company. So once I graduated, I actually took a job that was a little bit more creative. I took a job designing cars for Honda, and I did that for a year. And one of the things that kind of motivated me to leave is it was a great company, but working for large, big corporate companies, there's a lot of bottlenecks, and so I figured it was time for me to switch it up. And I was looking for kind of mid-sized companies, and I was specifically looking in consulting because I wanted the work to change up, pretty regularly, or at least my clients. And I came across this company, and it wasn't necessarily the litigation part that got me, but it was the people that were interviewing me. I really liked them, and I respected them, and I thought I could learn from them. And that's what's kept me here the entire time. It's the work is interesting, but really every day I feel like I'm learning something, and I'm constantly challenged. So that's what's kept me at this particular company for so long.
That's great, and very true in consulting, because you don't necessarily, you may spend a lot of time in one place, but you also get a lot of new projects and a lot of new challenges. So Harish, it looks like you have been able to join us. Let's see if you could share a little bit about yourself, when you graduated from USC, and if you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing in consulting and share the path you took to get here.
Very happy to. Hey everyone, apologies that I was a couple minutes late here. But yeah, I'm Harish Memuri. I graduated USC in 2013 with a degree in econ. I was part of the econ math concentration, and then I also had an Annenberg minor in sports media studies. These days I've spent 10 years basically with Bain, taking a break in between for law school, and I primarily focus on sustainability strategy cases. So I've done our perspective on the natural gas system and getting to net zero. I have also done work with a bunch of electric utilities integrating grid edge resources like solar panels on your roof or Tesla batteries in your garage, and have done work in the food space, like scaling up alternative proteins. So it's been a lot of fun. And back in the day, I got into it completely backwards. I had already taken the LSAT, was sure I was going to be a lawyer and go to law school. And my friends in the Marshall School asked me to help prepare them for interviews. In consulting, you end up doing a case interview style where you have to solve a little problem over the course of 30 minutes. That's essentially the sort of problem that we would solve at work, just simplified. And I fell in love with the method of problem solving, so I decided I would go do the interviews just for fun. I definitely got made fun of by my interviewers when I told them that please don't offer me this job. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm just here because these are fun and I wanted to do them with the people in the world who are the best at them. But one senior partner at Bain kind of saw that and said, "You have no clue what it's like to be a lawyer, do you?" And he was right, and kind of talked me into taking the consulting job instead.
So you were recruited away from being an attorney.
I guess so. Yeah, you could say that.
Well, that is definitely, as you can see, all the audience can see, there's a lot of different ways to get to getting your start in consulting. So let's go to the next question. And Harish, I'll stay with you because I think it kind of relates to what you were saying. How do you feel your economics degree helped prepare you for consulting? It sounds like you were jumping into just kind of trying out what it would be to interview for consulting. And obviously you had spent time at law school. So how do you feel your economics degree helped as you were working through the process?
Yeah, I almost wish, since we had a little pre-wire with the panelists here, I almost wish you went to John before. So I won't steal his answer, but he explains it really beautifully where he calls economics something like a science of choice. And I don't think I got that early in my career. Like honestly, early in my career, I did not use my economics degree all the time, even though it would have helped me. And I think where I really accelerated my career and like kind of started earning promotions and getting comfortable in the job was once you start to understand the underpinnings of economics, right? Like how do you get people to make choices and how do you decide what's the right choice in a logical fashion? And be able to kind of architect that in a way that makes sense to the people who have to make the choice, then all of a sudden you're doing your job a heck of a lot better. I'm not sure yet say that I do it really well, so I stayed away from that, but I certainly do it a lot better now than I did when I started, and economics has been a key part of that.
That's fantastic. John, Harish just shined a light over your way. So I'd love for you to share, how do you feel your economics degree helped prepare you for consulting?
Yeah, no, it's he kind of hit it on the head there, where it's economics. There's a lot of statistical tools that you use behind the scenes, but I think in the way that I approach every problem is it's a way of thinking, and we're taught in school, to apply certain things in certain situations, but in economics, a lot of times you're dealing with situations where you have to understand why something's happened. And it's always a why question. Why is this happening? Or, what caused this? And without economics and trying to understand, like how different things affect each other, when I approach a problem at work, I don't first think of, what regression I can apply to it. I'm first thinking, well, what goes into that and what would cause this outcome? And how do I fix this issue? And I really think it can be, it doesn't need to be economic consulting. Economics, I mean, if you approach any job or if you apply it to anything that you do post-college, it's really just the approach that it teaches you more than anything.
Very true. Natalie?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that they're saying about like the line of thought, and I think it really teaches you logical thinking as it's applied to decision making, or choice. I also have gotten the chance to work on a lot of things that have maybe more directly involved my economics degree. I've done a number of large mergers, getting to consult and try to understand the antitrust implications there, or getting to do a lot of econometrics cases. So the content learned in class has also been very helpful for me. Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, so we do actually use it later on, not just in the classroom. And Apurvi?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what everyone is saying. I think that especially for economic consulting, economic principles are a large part of like the analyses that we do. And I'd like to highlight the class on economic litigation consulting, which is very directly related to the current job and teaches you a lot about like what this might look like, because I actively worked on a few projects, and I'd say like the econometrics classes with like the work using like Stata and R, especially like I think that was helpful as well, because on the job we use a lot of like, at least I use a lot of like R on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Thank you so much. I'd like to, I do want to kind of take a step back and because I know the last industry insight panel was related to data analytics, and this, Natalie and Apurva, you both kind of touched on being able to use econometrics and things that were learned in class or were taught in class. I wanted to get your opinion on how much is data analytics involved in consulting? I think a lot of television shows or maybe, media portrays consulting as you go in and maybe you look at a bunch of trend lines and you make a recommendation and then you go out and you charge a lot of money. And that's not necessarily how actual consulting world works. So I guess I'd like to know, I'd like to hear, do you find that you work with data analytics a lot? Has it changed from when you first started out? And is it more or less than what you expected? And Apurva, if you can start us off with that.
Yeah, sure. I would say that like data analytics is a very, very large part of like, if not like majority of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And like my team specifically, like we can code in like Stata, R, Python, like whatever like we feel comfortable in, and like it depends from team to team, but it's definitely more than I expected. It seems like there's a lot of like Excel, like a mix of Excel, R, and other programming languages. There is some like writing involved, but I personally have not been put on a project where I've had to do that. So yeah, it's important.
I thought you would say that. Harish, I'd like to hear from you on with all of the things you're looking at in sustainability. How involved are you at looking at the data?
How involved am I in looking at the data? That's a great question. It's different, right? Like in economics, you're often looking at gigantic data sets and making sense of them, especially finding patterns in them, right? That's at least what I remember from econometrics class. Like that's often what you're doing. And if I look at my friends who've done like health economics PhDs or really any sort of PhD level economics, there's giant data sets. I would say in my line of work, pretty regularly, you're involved in looking at more limited sets of data, oftentimes that's already been processed by a set of economists, honestly, and then presenting like how do you make a decision off of that, right? Like if you know, for example, like there's a lot of what you don't know actually. Sorry, I should start there. Like if you have to make a decision as a utility on like what technologies to invest in as a gas utility and which pipes to decommission, etc. Unfortunately, it's not hiding somewhere in the data, but you do have information on how far along we've come with different sorts of technologies that'll enable you to get there, whether that's carbon capture or whether that is, you know, using, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find a pleasant word for methane from cow poop that comes from dairy farms, because that is actually, from a carbon accounting perspective, very good for the world to use that in your pipes. Regardless, I would say I'm in the data pretty regularly, but it's not the sort of data that will hold a candle to what the other three folks on this call process.
Great, thank you. Natalie, where are you on this spectrum? Closer to Apurva or Harish? And Was it more or less than you thought?
So I would say I'm close to the Purvey, but what I would say, I think this is maybe more of a question about my firm. So I do a lot of data work, but not everyone at my firm does. I kind of have decided that I enjoy data analytics and data work and get staffed on a lot of those cases accordingly. I would say maybe 50 to 60% of the cases that come through our doors have some big data component in the sense that it needs to be processed with, R, SQL, or an equivalent language. A lot of the other cases involve Excel, but, I'd say it can be as much or as little of your career as you want it to be, at least at Cornerstone. I have made it a large portion of mine, but it's not necessarily something everyone does. There's a lot of other types of work.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I do think that it's important to, to note that the firm, it doesn't mean that everyone in the consulting firm is going through data, but it is definitely there and a part of it. John, I'd love to hear your comments.
Yeah, I would say in my field, specifically in labor and employment economics, I mean, almost every project it has a large amount of data. So we're now getting into the billions of records when it comes to the large companies, because there's a record for everything. Every text message that's sent, every phone call you make, every time you log into your computer, all of these things are logged. And so when I started, almost 20 years ago, we had limited data sets. We could do a lot of it in Excel. Over the years, it's changed, and recently, and I've actually seen the industry change quite a bit. Courts are actually requiring now, for a lot of different types of lawsuits, they're requiring actual evidence-based testimony. So there's ways to approach it. Usually, if I have a new project come in, I can, based on my experience, I probably know what it's going to look like, but that data does have to be analyzed eventually. So it's a big part. As you work your way through your career, you look at the data less and you look at the results more, but those results are based on a lot of processing. So there's, it is pretty important. And I see it in other fields too. A lot of my clients are reaching out because they don't have the capabilities. And even outside of the economic consulting world, there's more companies are collecting more data. And if they want answers, a lot of times they have the data, they just don't know how to analyze it. So a lot of my job has moved away from actually testifying and actually just doing pure consulting work and helping them understand what's going on within their companies.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Finding that data, it's everywhere. And so, yes, there's a lot of help needed in it. So and that's kind of why I wanted to make sure we included this question on the panel, because I know it's not, it's not the center of the consulting universe, data analytics, but I know that it is very important. And if you are not the person running the models and the code, you are working with the person who is running models and the code. So thank you everyone for your answers on that. I'd like to switch back to your own personal feelings on working in consulting. And John, you touched on it when you were going through your decision process to enter consulting. So I'd like to ask you, what do you find most exciting about working in consulting? Is it the same as when you started, or there's some new things that you look forward to?
It's one of those things. I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm still surprised by the new types of projects that come up and the different types of clients. I've at one point earlier or at the end of last year, I went through my client list of all the different companies that I worked with, and I think I've worked with close to 75% of the Fortune 100 companies out there, and a ton of smaller ones. But this is every industry I've learned, and you have to learn it for each project. You have to know how things work, how people interact, what their jobs are, and you get you get a lot of experience. So it's with this type of consulting, you may not specialize in one particular industry, or you may, but regardless of that, you still have the same kind of issues that you're dealing with, but you always get to figure out new problems, because every company has their own problems. So it's a constant learning. You're constantly learning. You never get stuck on the same project for years and years. I think, if you wanted to, you could probably, find a good project that'll last you a year, depending on the industry. But, I'd say in a given year, I'm working on, at any given time, just, probably 10 or 15 different clients, and those roll over every month or so.
I find that to be true in my experience as well, and a big part of why I enjoy it. Natalie, could you share what do you find most exciting about consulting?
Yeah, I think what I've found most exciting about consulting, which is not necessarily the thing I've most enjoyed, but is getting to work on very impactful things. I have gone on a walk before and gotten a notification from the New York Times that my case settled, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do when I get back from the walk, because I guess this case is done. But just getting to work on things that are, having large scale impact and are large is kind of cool. Sometimes those big cases can get kind of crazy, but kind of getting to, do work that feels impactful is something I enjoy.
That's great. That's a great part of it. Harish?
Yeah, I would say the problem solving is by far the most exciting part of consulting. Just that moment where you get your arms around a very vague problem statement and you're able to make it clear in your head, and then a moment later you realize how you can make it clear to others. There's a serious thrill to that is probably a bit unlike anything I experienced before the working world. It's a little unlike classroom work, and the closest thing honestly was in law school. I guess later on, after undergraduate in law school, when you figured out the theory of the case that you wanted to present, that is just fun. I think it gives all of you who are listening something to look forward to in your professional career. It's it changes from maybe this systematic progression of learning, which I also enjoyed a lot, to rather applying that learning. And there's a lot of joy that comes in that. It's kind of concentrated. It's a bit more like a bolt of lightning than a steady flow of electricity.
Very true. Very true. Apurvi, do you find that to be true? And also, what do you find most exciting about working in consulting?
I think because I've been working for a year and a half, I think entry level positions maybe less at least for me it wasn't as exciting, if I'm being honest, because I think you come in and there's a steep learning curve, and then there is a lot of data analytics that is involved in it. But I will say though that the exposure that I got very early on, because especially in a consulting organization, you can talk to different teams, you can see what different people are doing, and just learn a lot about what's happening out there, and get a lot of exposure on things that you might enjoy, you may not enjoy. And I think that that was very exciting for me, just talking to all the economic experts at my company and picking their brains on what they think about certain things and not. But in the work itself, I would say for me, problem solving has been more problem solving my code, and not doing as much of the big picture analytics, at least at an entry level stage.
I appreciate you saying that, and actually would love to stay with you for the next question, because you touch on the realities of consulting. There are some things that are very exciting, and then there are some challenges. So could you share maybe a challenge that you've faced in consulting that you think is important for people interested in pursuing a career in this industry to consider?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, what's been quite challenging is working under like the amount of pressure that like because especially in economic litigation consulting, there are a lot of strict deadlines and things move like extremely fast. So like things like time management, attention to detail, and like working under pressure become key. So if you're not someone who enjoys that kind of a high pressure environment, like it might get a little like overwhelming. That said, there are a lot of people who love like the data work and like that really interests them and that keeps them going. So yeah.
Thank you. John, could you share maybe a challenge you think is important for the audience to consider?
Yeah, I mean, so in consulting, I mean, there's it. You're just saying a challenge of the industry in general.
Right, just a challenge. Well, it can be a challenge of the industry in general, or a specific challenge that you didn't really expect, on a project that happened that, made you stop for a second and say, "Ooh, maybe consulting isn't 100% perfect," but.
Yeah, so I'll say one thing is it does take a certain personality to be in consulting. There's with, and I'll just talk about within my company, because that's the best experience that I've had. But we have there's consulting. You're constantly working for outside clients, so they're not internal projects, and every client has their own deadlines. And this is whether you're within litigation or not. I work in litigation, so they're court deadlines. And when you are a consultant, you're usually fixing problems, and your clients are proactive problems are the best to fix because you've got time to fix them. You're trying to figure out what they are to make them more efficient. If you're fixing problems that exist and there's a deadline on it, a lot of times, it requires quick shifting from one project to another. And there's not a consistent, there's no consistent schedule. When things need to be done, they need to be done. But there is a separate track, where some individuals like a little bit more stable. They just like the program. They don't want to deal with that client interaction. It's a little bit more stable in those situations. But otherwise, when you're client facing, you're constantly pivoting from one thing to the next. You don't always just get 8 hours to spend on one project. Usually it's, an hour here, 3 hours there, 15 minutes here, constantly shifting. So that is a challenge to get used to. And it definitely takes a certain personality, for somebody that's okay with that type of work environment.
Very true. I've experienced that myself. Natalie, would you like to share a challenge you faced?
Sure. I think kind of similar to what John is saying. I think the hours were better than I expected in the sense of how many hours I was actually working, but the impact of that was worse than I expected. I think when I was an undergrad, you hear all this talk of like, oh, a 70-hour week, a 60-hour week, an 80-hour week. And when I was an undergrad, at least, as I said, I started wanting to be an investment banker. I was kind of comparing everything to that yardstick of I was like, oh, a 60, 70-hour week, that can't be that bad. Like investment bankers work 100-hour weeks, that's 40 hours less. But no, working a 60 to 70-hour week is tough. I, worked a very long, it's like an 80 or 90-hour week, my third week of work at the firm, and that kind of reset that expectation. On the other hand, the actual hours I've worked have been a lot better than I expected. I'd say my average week is 45 to 50 hours a week, which isn't that bad. But something to keep in mind is, being someone who wants a challenging workplace and, you know, doesn't mind hours, I think is probably the mindset to go into it, as opposed to, you know, being interested in consulting and begrudgingly doing the hours.
I think that's great advice, because that's definitely hours are, because it always depends on the deadlines, as John was saying. The hours, sometimes you can have a lighter week and other times you have to finish something. So thank you so much, Natalie. Harish?
Yeah. Are we speaking to just exactly like what the hours are on the job, or how
No,
we found?
if you could just share a challenge you faced, I think it would be helpful. Just something, either something you didn't really expect to face in consulting, or just as you were working on a project, a challenge that came up that you think it would be helpful to share that story, so that those who are interested in pursuing consulting can kind of consider that as they're weighing their options.
Thank you. I would say one of the most challenging things in consulting is because we switch work so frequently, whether in the same day, as John mentioned, or let's say every couple of months, as is more common with like our one project at a time style at Bain. It is a constant feedback culture. Like, you've always got someone in your ear telling you what you can do better. Sometimes they tell you what you're doing well also, but either way, you're hearing from people all the time. And I would say that that really does take some getting used to and some being ready for, frankly. But I think all of you can do it. Like, it was a huge challenge for me, at least. Not necessarily that it got me down, but knowing how to understand this volume of subjective, qualitative feedback on my work, not like you got the math problem wrong. That was a huge challenge for me early in my career. So it's something worth being ready for, and as soon as possible, find your interpreters in life where you can go to them and just, if you're ever confused, read them out exactly what someone else said and see if they can help make it useful for you.
I think that's great advice. And if I could, I'd like to ask you another question. It looks like we have time. What would you say are the top 3 skills that applicants need to be prepared to demonstrate during the hiring process?
Is that right back to me?
Yeah, right back to you, Harish.
Nice. Demonstrating in the application process, I think just one, right? Like, show that you can take something somewhat complex and make it simple. Show that you can work your way down a logical progression. We throw these made up problems at you in the case interview style, and just nailing that interview is the key to getting this job. So ultimately, what you have to be able to do is show that you can take that choice framework that we talked about, like, and that you can develop one of those and lay out really logically, like, hey, if I was the business manager, which is a little different than economics, where you're often either like pretending to be the entire economy or an individual like consumer. But let's say you manage one business, one firm in this economy. What are the set of choices I actually have available to me, and how do I think about which one is best? If you can do that, you will get this job. But also, if you can do that, maybe you should just go start a business and be a CEO. It's better than being a consultant, at least in pay.
And just like that, you're redirecting all the future consultants.
I hope
But
not. It's a good job. I love it. But if you're really, really good at making business choices, there's at least a more lucrative job out there for you.
it's very true, very true, very, very helpful feedback. Apurvi, I would like to ask you the same question. What would you say are the top 3 skill applicants need to be prepared to demonstrate? And I know it's helpful that Harish and you are looking at this, I think, from different perspectives. So it'd be nice to hear what you think the applicant should be trying to demonstrate.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, like, analytical thinking is extremely important, definitely. And attention to detail, especially in like economic consulting, very important. And time management, I don't know, like in an interview, how that would kind of play out, but I think specifically, I think my interview was very focused on the research that I did in college, and it like we really dug deep into like my methodology and like why, and there were like 5 why questions, like going deeper into like the smallest of reasons of why I did everything. So I think it's very similar in that a lot of logical thinking, but in a more economic setting. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That is helpful. John, do you have some skills that you would like to recommend?
Yeah, definitely. So I, to a certain extent, I think it's important to be able to explain what you've learned in school, or at least conceptually discuss it. Not necessarily every single topic, but just broadly. But what I look for most, what I think is most important is and again, for consulting, there's so much data analytics going on right now. If you do have some of those hard skills with programming or whatever, that can be great. And that's going to give you, kind of like a head start. But what I'm really looking forward or towards is individuals that I know when I'm sitting there with them and we go over those, those tough questions in the interview. I'm not always looking for the right answer. I'm just looking for somebody that can work through the problem. And I'm looking for somebody that has the ability to learn. Because school is going to teach you a lot of concepts. But I don't think most companies want you set in your way. They want to know that you can learn their way of doing it, or learn, on a new project, come up with new ideas that there's no, equation for already. So it's really the ability to learn. And then aside from that, I'm really looking for, as Harish said, somebody that can explain difficult concepts in simple ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, somebody that, culture fit is very important. You're going to be with these people long hours every day. You're going to spend more time with them than you spend at home when you're not sleeping. And so it's, it's really, those soft skills are very important as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I hope everyone in the audience is writing all of these answers down, because it's very true in this space. And Natalie, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would also say problem-solving skills with respect to the case interview. I don't think, we're not here to test you on your knowledge of one specific concept, but more kind of seeing your critical thinking skills and how you walk through a problem. I think something else that is really important for our firm, and might be for the other econ consulting shops, I'm not entirely sure, but is that you know what we do and that you demonstrate that you're interested in it. We have a lot of people who apply to Cornerstone, but generally are looking for management consulting. And I have nothing against management consulting. I think it's a great field, but it's not, what we do. And so I think if you know what we do and can demonstrate that, it will give you a leg up. Specifically, we do read cover letters. I'm involved with USC recruiting, so I'm just going to put that out there, as we do read cover letters. So we'll get a leg up if you demonstrate what we do. I think the other thing and piece of advice is, in a case interview setting, if you make a mistake or don't know the answer, telling us, correcting yourself or admitting you don't know the answer. Trying to solve it, but admitting you don't know is going to come across a lot better than, kind of BSing your way through the answer. Apologies for the language. But I think, just something to keep in mind. If you got the answer wrong and you think we don't notice it, like we did. If you did the math wrong, like we know you did it wrong. Just like tell us, and then always feel free to correct answers if you made a mistake. But I would say that's helpful.
I think that's an excellent point and an excellent piece of advice to share, because so much of consulting is asking questions first and not knowing everything when you first walk in on day one. So I think it's important to highlight that there is a little bit of that. You need to be able to say you don't know or admit that something was wrong so that you can move forward, rather than trying to defend a position that may not have been the right one, or may not be the right one once you get new information. With that said, Harish, I'd like to also hear from you, maybe one piece of advice, we're getting close to the 7 o'clock hour, so I just want to make sure that we leave behind, one piece of advice you would like to share with the audience about consulting, or just even career advice.
You really put me on the spot here, but fair enough. If you don't mind, just give me like 10 seconds to think
No.
through it.
No problem.
Thanks.
I can ask another panelist if you would like. That's not a problem.
Oh, it's okay. I think I'm just about ready with it. But my
Okay.
one piece of career advice is to reflect a piece of advice that was itself secondhand for when I heard it. But the best person I've ever worked with, who was actually at the Department of Justice and not in consulting, is a guy called Dan Yee. And he told me the one thing his parents told him is, if you're going to do anything, do it to the absolute best you can, but then regularly pull up and figure out if you're playing the right game. Because if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And so since you are all in undergrad, all I mean by that is you pick any of these careers. Like, everyone comes to campus, we recruit you, we try to tell you what it's about. And whichever one you pick, go forward with absolutely no regrets, and like try to understand what it's about and do it as well as you possibly can. But then regularly pull up and look at, like, if I do this job really well, what are the prizes, right? Like, do I feel internally satisfied? Do I get the sort of compensation I want? Do I get to think about the sort of topics and make the sort of changes that I want to see in the world? Whatever it is that matters to you, stop, check, measure that regularly. Because if you're excellent and you bring a great attitude every day, that's going to carry through, and that's your reputation for a long time. And I find that the people who can't manage that oftentimes are trying to mix the two times. Like, they're trying to figure out how their experience is going while they try to work, and you end up with like a half-baked effort on both fronts. They don't really know whether they like what they're doing, and I can certainly tell you that they're not doing it to their best possible capability. So I would say that's my one piece of advice.
And it's true. You need to take that time, take a step back, and it is hard to live in it and assess it. Apurvi, would you like to share one piece of advice? Share one piece of advice with the audience?
Sure. I definitely like to echo what Harish said. Like, I think that like what he said is so important, that whatever path you choose, like to choose it and to give it your everything. And then, but occasionally, like, swim up the water to kind of see like, okay, is this really for me? And like, what is this making me feel? But like, while like doing it, to give it your best. And I think to go one step deeper, to, I think, figure out like before like accepting a job offer, or before like applying to different jobs, to really understand what is the day-to-day function of like analysts or associates, and like kind of thinking back in time, where when has there been a time where like you have done a role similar to it, and like how has that made you feel, and is that motivating and satisfying, and really thinking deeply about that, because I think that that will give a very good like gauge of whether or not like like the day-to-day function of the job is exciting or not, because that is at the end of the day what like you'd have to do. So I guess that's
Very true. Very true, because you spend most of your day, your waking hours, as John mentioned, working on this. So you really need to take that time and make sure it is the thing you want to do. And John, I'd love to hear from you, a piece of advice.
Yeah, so I'll expand on kind of what Harish said, because I agree with everything he said. It's work.
We all agree.
Yeah, go in there and work as hard as you can. And this is not only within the company but externally as well. But once you start a job, go introduce yourself to every single person in there and try to work with different people on different things. Because, and this goes for any kind of industry, say you don't enter consulting, just, there's a lot of different paths that you can take in life. And unless you lift your head a little bit and look around, you may end up in a path that you didn't want to end up in. You may get pigeonholed into a certain industry, and look away from the money that's offered to you to a certain extent, and look at the whole package, what it brings to your life, what enjoyment it brings to your life. Look at the money too, but look at everything. Step back and take a look. And if you don't see yourself there in a couple of years, well, work as hard as you can, make them remember you, and then move on. Because we can only do this once, and you don't want to, go in just solely for, the paycheck, or just solely for one thing or the other. Look at it kind of, from a distance and say, is this how I imagine things? And so that's really the advice I can give.
It's true, because I know people who look at different jobs to look just for the title, and the title that they want is not the description underneath that title is not necessarily what they're interested in. So it is important to take a step back and look at the big picture. I really appreciate all of the answers. They were fantastic and very helpful. I know that we had a specific question, and I'm looking through right now from Zion. What type, I know Harish answered it in the chat, but I'd just like to give everyone in the panel a chance to give their input. What type of subfield within consulting should I look into if I'm in quantitative analysis? I'm majoring in economic data science and applied math. And there were, with that as the background, does anyone, Harish, you want to elaborate on your response, or does anyone want to speak to what you'd recommend they concentrate in consulting?
Yeah, I guess I'll speak up. That's a difficult question. I think every industry is, if you look at, how important analytics is, it's really kind of entered every industry. So you kind of have to look at it from what you're interested in. I guess the topics that you're interested in, but there's going to be a place for you probably anywhere you go. But every single industry has consultants. Everybody does, and it's just whether they use data or not. Maybe in political consulting, you may use less data, but still, even there's somebody that has to provide the statistics. So I would just say, look for an industry that really, strikes you as an interesting industry, because there's going to be a job out there for it.
Thank you, John. We have another question here. Anyone open to anyone on the panel? Is having a master or PhD necessary or helpful for a consulting career?
Certainly not necessary. I can't speak to the two of the firms here. I know because I applied to Cornerstone, at least coming out of undergrad, but at least Bain and Cornerstone certainly take undergrad applicants. I don't know. I assume the other two do as well. Apurvi, you said you started straight out of undergrad, right? So I don't think it's necessary. It it can be helpful because it teaches you how to think. Like I purposefully stuff my team full of advanced degrees. We've got 3 PhDs on my team right now, but I will tell you what, not a single one of them is using this. Like it, they're all 3 science PhDs from Harvard and Stanford. We do not do anything scientific, right? Like I just picked them because they're good at thinking. So that's really up to you, but you're not going to use the specific knowledge you gain in that degree most of the time unless you do very specific PhD fields in this job.
Thank you, Harish. And Natalie?
Yeah, I would agree at an entry level, it's not necessary. I think as you climb up the ranks of the firm, sometimes it can be helpful to go back to grad school or get a degree. I did a master's in applied economics. I have found that it hasn't been the most helpful in my current job in the sense of like needing a master's degree to like get on the cases I want or something like that. That said, there are substantially more exit opportunities available if you have a master's degree. I mean, the exit opportunities are available, great. Are great regardless, but I guess I would say that I don't think it's necessary, but I also don't think it's a waste of time if it's something you want to do.
Thank you, Natalie. I agree. Because there is a lot of on-the-job learning as everyone has kind of mentioned. So I think it isn't necessary, but it definitely is helpful. Especially if it's industry specific. Apurvi, did you want to add to those comments?
Yeah, I definitely think starting out like a master's degree is not needed, but I definitely think after a certain point, at least at NERA, to climb up like the ladder for economic consulting, a master's degree is needed. I think it's the transition to consultant, and then and I think so it depends like if you plan to stay in it. It depends on the company and like I guess do you see yourself in this industry long term? And
Very, very true. Very personal decision. It is 7 o'clock, so we have one more question in the queue I'd like to ask the panel before we say our goodbyes. But the question is my long-term career aspiration is founding my own business. Is it a good idea to work in a consulting firm to kind of gain some experience before I start my entrepreneurial venture? I see. Anyone in the panel want to offer? I know Harish, you kind of mentioned, just be an entrepreneur if you can answer all these questions. And I know John, it looks like you may want to mention something.
Yeah, no, I guess I can go for this one. So I listen to this podcast pretty regularly. It's called How I Built This, and they bring on CEOs. And I'm just going to talk about this because I find it to be true in the working world as well. But I think the average age of a successful CEO or successful company, the average age of the CEO was somewhere between 40 and 45, somewhere around there. And that's not saying that you shouldn't start a company right away, but I think based on listening to that and based on my experience in my field, experience is not necessarily, it's not about having good ideas. It's about knowing how to deal with the bad stuff that comes up in the process of building those good ideas into a business. And the best way to learn from mistakes is from somebody else's mistakes. So if you've got a great idea, I say go for it. Don't wait on it because you have a lot more time to build the company over the long run and overcome any kind of stumbles that you take. But at the same time, learning from people is just being around smart people through osmosis. You pick up good habits, and you start to figure yourself out. And so I would suggest at least working a couple years before starting your own company or deciding to go back to school, because that's, being in school is one thing, and then learning how to work outside of school is another story, because it's not as, the deadlines are always different. They tell you not to procrastinate, but in consulting, you don't have that choice. You learn how you deal with things in the real world, and you learn that the stakes are more than grades. It's, your livelihood. So I don't know. I would suggest, working a little bit. Doesn't necessarily need to be consulting, but it could be anything.
I will absolutely back John on that. If you want to start I think if you want to start a business right away, you better both already be very, very good at like knowing how to work and knowing how to work on teams and knowing how to work like in ways that are effective. And you should probably try to serve a market you understand really well. And so I've seen it, right? Like actually Facebook's probably the mega example of this. I was thinking of some smaller ones that friends have done. Facebook, you can start in college because, well, you really understand the market of people that Facebook started out with. The business it grew into today, I mean, that guy must just be incredible at working with others and cracking the bad stuff that came towards him. But in general, you want a bit of experience under your belt. You want some experience like learning how you craft a team first and foremost, and then how to work with teams that are full of different people with different motivations. And if you are thinking of consulting as a pathway, I will pitch Bain for just a second here. Our recruiting department has told me that we lead the entire we lead all companies in the number of unicorn CEOs produced per capita. I have absolutely no clue how they measured that. Please don't hunt me down if it's wrong. But they made the claim. So I'm going to pass that claim on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for passing that along and pitching Bain and giving everyone in the audience one of many firms to take a look at, do some research on to see where they fit in the consulting world. John, Purvi, Natalie, would you like an opportunity to pitch your firms, or are we good? Well, thank you. Thank you again to the panelists for your time. Just getting to ask you guys these questions. I have, a bunch more, but I know time is limited. So I hope that I get to ask you at some future event. A big thank you to the Department of Economics for hosting the event. And I wish all the attendees the best of luck. And I look forward to our paths crossing again soon. So thank you guys.